So, my name's Ian Seeger. I'm really looking forward to today. I'm heading off to go and meet Tim Dawson, founder of SkyDemon. We all know SkyDemon well, and we've all seen the tips that we run every week on the live stream, I hope. If you haven't, check them out and check out the compilations on YouTube. So, some compilations of 10 tips at a time there. But I'm not sure how many of us know that much about Tim Dawson himself, about how SkyDemon came about, how it works these days, and where it's going. So let's go find out.
So, Tim Dawson, OBE. Tell us, how did it all start? How did you get going?
I got my pilot's license when I was 23, and that was in 2006, I think. And then I started wanting to fly a bit further and do more interesting stuff. And it was quite difficult, I thought, because you were still expected to draw your route on a paper chart, which I was fine with, although the chart I thought was a bit complicated and full of stuff. And you had to get your NOTAMs off a website or off the notice board at the airfield. And the NOTAMs were all just full of coordinates and things. And weather was on a different website. It all seemed a little bit too complicated to me. So what I'm good at, and have always been good at, is making software that makes stuff easy, even when it's hard. So at some point over the next couple of years, I started cobbling together, just as a hobby, a little bit of data. Starting with a bare bones map and some NOTAMs, and just to see if I could make something that made it a bit easier for me personally.
It's 2022. You've got an OBE, 3 Queen's Awards to industry. Clearly, the whole enterprise is a fantastic success. What's the secret of that success?
I think it's our relentless drive to make everything as good as it possibly can be for our customers. We just all we do is solve the problems that our customers are continually bumping into, whether it's charts that are too complicated, or lack of easy availability of data, or making things standard across all the different countries in Europe who inevitably do things differently. We just keep plugging and plugging away until we're sure that our software is as good as it possibly can be, and we'll never get there, but we just keep trying.
Different people want different things. How do you resolve that conflict when those different things are kind of like against each other?
Well, you never entirely resolve it, and that's the first secret to it. You can't please everyone. You've got to know you can't please everyone, and so you've got to sometimes make hard decisions. I mean, we love all our customers, and some of them have problems that if we were to solve those problems for those customers, which we would love to, because I'm a software engineer and I love solving problems, but sometimes you can solve a problem for one group of people and make life harder for everyone else because your product becomes too complicated. And so we really try to avoid that. So we try and stay focused on the majority, if there is such a thing as being focused on the majority, because our philosophy is that if we don't think that a requested feature is going to help at least 10% of our customers, then we don't do it. How long does the development cycle take? That's a hard question to answer, because sometimes it takes hours. We can often roll things out straight away if we see a NOTAM that looks badly depicted, or we think we could have done a better job of something. And sometimes it will take months, because we'll start to hear a trickle of customers who say they want something, and it all gets noted down by my colleagues in customer support. And we sit down periodically and we look at the issues people have run into. And if we think that a lot of people are running into an issue and we're in a position to make that a lot better, then we start really thinking about what the right solution to the problem is. And that's hard, because sometimes a customer with a problem will express a desired solution to that problem, and that may not be the right solution for the most amount of people.
Over the years, has beta testing changed? Was there a lot more input from beta testers at the beginning than there is now?
It would be fair to say there was more input from beta testers earlier on, probably because there was a lot more intensity of new features early on. Nowadays we ship very few radical new features because we actually think that we've got all the features that most people want, but we're continually working on the software and developing it, but it becomes more subtle. And since the changes are more subtle, we write a bit more for beta testers to get into, but there's no major things to report feedback on. And also, a lot of testing has already happened in-house before things get to beta testers these days. So it's often the case that what we put out there works fine, doesn't need much feedback. Occasionally we get people saying, yeah, I like this, or you've broken this, and that's appreciated, and we do stuff about that.
Okay, so if someone had picked up the early version, version 1 of SkyDemon, which I'm hoping survives somewhere on a hard disk for somebody, and learnt to use it compared to, and somebody did exactly the same with the latest version of SkyDemon, there are clearly more features and more complexity to it. How do you keep on top of keeping it simple? People invest time in learning to do something, but if it's too complicated, then they don't.
How do we keep it simple? Well, we very rarely add anything to SkyDemon which puts another button or another sort of complication at the top level of the user interface. We're really mindful of the fact that not all our customers are necessarily the most computer literate. They've taken the time, invested to learn how to use SkyDemon, and we really resist making changes to the user interface. Over the years, we've made the software a lot more powerful, but one of the challenges in doing that is that we absolutely cannot make it more complicated. And interestingly, because we talk about all the things we do, there's often a perception that we're making the software more complicated, but a huge amount of effort internally goes into making sure that every enhancement we make it doesn't bring with it a more complicated user interface. And if we have to add a button somewhere, we take one away somewhere else. We love removing pointless options, or options that have become redundant over time. And so we try and keep a balance in the software that way.
Where do you think future developments in SkyDemon will take place? Is there any particular area? Is it mapping? Is it audio? Is it data?
In terms of future enhancements to SkyDemon, I think that, as I mentioned before, we've got all the features that we need at the moment, but a few years ago we had fewer features, and I would have said then that we had all the features we need as well. And so what's important for us now is adapting to the changing market conditions. A few years ago, we didn't have any integration of traffic, and that's now become a hot topic among pilots. And that's still sort of sorting itself out with the different varieties of electronic conspicuity out there. But as soon as there was a need for electronic conspicuity integration in SkyDemon, we doubled down and focused on how to best integrate that, and then we invented things like vocal traffic alerts and things like that.
Okay, I mean, I guess certainly in terms of traffic, voice is a really powerful aid to traffic awareness. So I'm guessing that voice will play I'm guessing and maybe even hoping that voice will play an increasing part in SkyDemon's future.
Yeah, when we did the voices for traffic, after that we quickly added voices for all the existing warnings, and we present a nice user interface so people can choose a voice that they like. We try really hard not to speak more than we have to, because we care a lot that when we do speak, people listen to it. And if we speak too much, people will just tune it out, or even worse, turn the whole thing off.
Going back to the beginning, changing the subject radically, you dabbled as a hobby to produce some software that made it easy for you to plan your flights when you were learning to fly. What was the transition from that to a commercial product? And if I remember correctly, the original commercial product was kind of supplied on a Windows CE device, whatever one of those is.
Yeah, so it was quite a long transition. I remember cobbling together what became SkyDemon on an airplane on my way back from a conference in Seattle. And I'd found this rudimentary airspace data for the UK and some coastline data and stuff, so I made a little map, and at that point I thought, well, if you could click on different bits of the map, it should be as easy as clicking, and then you would actually make a route between these things. And it took a year or two after that to change this software into something that was actually useful. The first builds of the software would calculate your heading for you, which prevented me from having to use the whiz wheel, which I didn't think was particularly efficient at the time. And it took a long time to get as much useful thing onto our chart as there was on a printed chart. And the journey into going commercial was only after various friends and flying buddies had looked at the software and said, "Oh, that looks pretty good, actually." And I was surprised by this and encouraged. So I was looking at the market for commercial software that did what my little bit of software did. And there seemed to only be one bit of software. It was quite expensive. I couldn't afford it. And from looking at the screenshots, it looked quite hard to use as well. So I thought, and this is something I always think, I thought I don't really want to look at what existing things do to solve a problem. I want to solve it in the way that would be best for me to use. And so that's the approach I took. I invented something from the ground up, not knowing how anything worked already. I didn't know how any flight planning software worked, and I didn't know how any in-flight navigation software worked, because the aircraft I used to hire from the airfield I learned to fly at had nothing in it, which is quite common. So I invented something that worked for me and made it easy to work out my tracks, and eventually got some NOTAMs in there.
And that was on a Windows CE device in the early days. Did you have to buy hardware to get SkyDemon?
So in the earliest days of SkyDemon, as soon as it launched commercially, it was basically some software that you install on your Windows PC. And at the same time, we had a little bit of software that worked on a Windows CE device. Now, there aren't many of those around anymore, but they were little devices, typically made in the Far East, that you could install software on that would turn a generic handheld device into a navigator, much as you might get in your car. So in the earliest days of SkyDemon, we released our own little bit of software that one could install on those devices, which were kicking around. And not long after that, when we started to have a little bit of money coming through the door, we were able to afford to have our own devices made, branded, boxed, and those were known as the early SkyDemon Mobile SD and MD. And they ran a sort of cut down but dedicated version of SkyDemon. By today's standards, they're obviously very rudimentary, but they did the job, they did it well, they were exceptionally stable, and they offered everything that people needed at the time to safely navigate their flight.
So from the outside, it seems to me that the move from the kind of hardware devices onto tablets and phones, effectively Apple tablets and phones, was a fairly significant change with the benefit of hindsight. What did it look like at the time?
At the time, I resisted for quite some time going to other devices because, to put it frankly, it's an awful lot of engineering effort required to do that, and I was and remained the only software developer at SkyDemon. So after a while, it became clear that iPads, in particular, were not going away. They were a really good platform on which to build compelling software, and more people were getting them anyway. So I invested the effort into putting together SkyDemon for iPad, which took a few months initially, but what we initially launched was a good product. It worked in a very smooth and slick way, like people who are accustomed to iPads are expecting, and it was an immediate success.
And how long after that did you introduce on the Android platform?
I think it was a couple of years after we released an iPad version that we got to Android. The build tools that we used to make SkyDemon did not offer support for Android at the time we did iPad version. But once they did, we were able to adopt that, and another significant engineering effort was underway to make SkyDemon work on all 3 or 4 or even 5 platforms at the time, it was a considerable effort, but it was rewarding because what we ended up with is a product that's engineered really well. It's the same code pretty much that is compiled and makes the products for, at the time, 5 different platforms, which was pretty exciting and very satisfying as an engineer to get it to that stage.
So I think given that a whole bunch of the new Macs are now shipping with the M1 chip, which I think is the same chip as you get in the new iPads, is there potential for having SkyDemon on a desktop, on a Mac iOS?
So you can already run SkyDemon on an M1 Mac. You can run the iOS version basically, and that gives you most of the planning features, and I don't think many of the in-flight features. It's possible we'll move more to the Mac in future, but it's too early to say at this stage.
What is it that makes you get up in the morning? What makes you excited to go to work? What makes you excited about creating software?
What I really like is seeing how we help people out. Being in the office, being with my colleagues is really important, and it means I get the feedback constantly of how people are getting on with the product. And we're in an unusual and lucky position that people go out of their way to phone us up or email us to tell us how much SkyDemon has helped them recently, which is fantastic to hear for all of us. And it's so encouraging because as well as the inevitable challenges that people face and wish we did more to help them. We have so many people that just come to us and say, you did such and such to help me out today. I couldn't have got back from France, or I couldn't have done this or that, or the weather closed in unexpectedly and I would have had a really hard time were it not for SkyDemon helping me out. And that's so good to hear. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning and encourages me to keep going and working on the software.
Hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you did, please do me a favour, give us a like, leave a comment and subscribe. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe and become a member of the Flyer Club. We'd love to have you. Thank you.